could and had not succeeded?
Well, I believe that my aim was to create awareness that if we wanted Muslims to integrate into society and other immigrants, that we had to look beyond social economic factors, and we had to look at cultural factors, at religious factors that could be of influence on that integration. And in that I have succeeded. I've also succeeded in putting on the political agenda the position of Muslim women who are victims of their own families and victims of violence, and that's being addressed appropriately in the Netherlands now.
I'm interested you say that because, of course, your argument was about Islam, it was about cultural values, but I noticed that many of your friends, never mind your enemies, many of your friends were constantly telling you through the late 90s, but more particularly in the period from 2002 to 2006, Ayaan, be careful, calm things down, tone things down. You are saying things that are simply too provocative.
That is true. I was saying that there is a connection between the basic tenets of Islam and terrorism and the violence as we see it today, and that by acknowledging that we can change the faith, those of us who are born into that faith. And that generated threats, and that's true, it is still generating threats. But because of all the incidents that took place after the 11th of September worldwide, many people are saying, well, there's no other way than to confront this ideology. And many people still believe in the strategy that if you say it has anything to do with Islam, violence has got anything to do with Islam, you may alienate all those large numbers of Muslims who are not violent. And I think that the two are not mutually exclusive.
Well, let's talk about alienation. You, in an interview in 2003, you described the Prophet Muhammad as, and I'm quoting, as by our standards, a perverse man, a tyrant. That was a provocation.
There were men, and still are men, who defend taking a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old as a wife and having sex with her, as saying, well, I can do that because the Prophet is my moral guide. And I said very clearly, if we measure that by the Western standards today, we would, that would be, the term that I use.
You stand absolutely by that statement?
Yes, I do.
And do you stand by your clear, unambiguous view that Islam is a religion of violence, that it legitimizes the killing of the unbeliever, that it legitimizes all sorts of violence against women, including rape, and you justify all of this by saying that it is in the Quran? Is that still your unambiguous position?
That is my unambiguous position. It's also in the Hadith, and there is a distinction between Islam as it is today and Islam as we would all like it to be or to become. And in these debates between people who defend Islam as a religion of peace and people who say, no, there's something wrong with Islam, what I notice is those who defend Islam as a religion of peace are talking about an Islam that is not there yet, sort of normative Islam. And I think that Islam of peace will come if we acknowledge that there is a lot of violence. In the Quran, Muhammad was a very violent man when he wanted to, and in the Hadith, and that we acknowledge that and then change and then move on. Because if you don't acknowledge that there's something wrong with the religion, there's no need to talk about reforming.
But you're not an Islamic scholar, are you?
You don't necessarily have to be an Islamic scholar. In the Islam that I was brought up, in the Quran and in everywhere, we are all equal in the eyes of God. It's my heritage. I've been brought up in that faith, and I feel an obligation, considering the way the world is today, and a huge appeal has been made on Muslims after 9/11 to participate in the debate, distance oneself from the violence, and that's exactly what I've been doing. And I'm saying there's something wrong with our faith, and that we have to acknowledge that and then change it.
But as you rightly say, there has been a debate, some of it provoked by your own writings and words, and I would assume you take heed of other people's positions in this debate. I'm wondering what you make. I saw the transcript of a debate you had with Tariq Ramadan, the Islamic scholar who lives in Europe now. He responded to the words that we've just discussed, your words about Islam, by saying, yes, Islam needs to be self-critical, but to characterize a religion as violent based on a handful of individual lines is simplistic and superficial and simply fuels extremism rather than acknowledging the complexity of Islam.
I wish it were true that it was just a handful of individuals.
Is there no complexity to Islam? Is it as black and white as you say? This is a religion of violence and that's it?
There is complexity in the sense that there are Muslims, 1.2 to 1.5 billion Muslims, who don't all practice Islam as they should. But if you look at the definition of Islam, submission to the will of Allah, and the submission, what that submission should mean is in the Quran, we have a bunch of books called the Hadith left to us, and the Prophet as a moral guide. Well, there are more violent things in that faith than in any other faith. The Islamic faith has not been through a reformation, it has not been through an enlightenment. There is no need to deny that. And if you look at all the violent acts today in the world, you see that about 2/3 of them, according to American security officials, 2/3 of them, Muslims are involved, either Muslims against other Muslims or Muslims among themselves. And Muslims make up only 1/5 of the world population. There's no need to deny that reality. We can't acknowledge it and reform it.
But you see, many Muslims have a problem with your approach because they believe that in the end your desire, your attitude is all about provocation, sort of throwing a rhetorical hand grenade toward their faith, toward Islam. One newspaper editor, respected editor here in the UK of the newspaper Al-Quds Al-Arabi, Abdul Bari Atwan, he has described you as a mirror image of the Muslim extremists that you say you are taking on. He describes what you characterize as Islam as a form of cultural bin Ladenism of your own.
You know, what's curious about such reactions is they're always very quiet when in the name of Islam people are beheaded. All sorts of anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish acts are carried out. When buildings are blown up, airports are blown up, when in this last attempt a number of Muslims are caught trying to plot the disaster of others, it's always quiet.
But
there's
talking
nothing
of
going
anti-Semitism,
on.
Abdul Bari Atwan's point is that if you said the same things about Judaism that you say about Islam, you would be accused and condemned across the world for being anti-Semitic.
But there are no Jews today who are blowing themselves up in people's faces. There are no Jews who are taking airplanes and flying them into tall buildings. There are no Jews who are plotting the destruction of others. And as Muslims, and what we've been called on to do is take a look at yourself, take a look at your faith and try to change that. And I'm involved in that debate and I see things from a certain perspective and I welcome people with a contrary view. But I don't think that this man convinces me that by engaging, exercising that self-reflection, that I'm a detriment to the faith. He doesn't convince me.
I am interested that you say you actively want this debate, and indeed I believe you're currently writing a book which is all about how to reform Islam to make it modern. Is that right? That's what your book is going to be about?
My book is I'm going to raise the Prophet Muhammad in the New York Public Library where he will be surrounded by books.
You will imagine the Prophet
I will imagine
in modern-day New York,
yes,
talking to
Karl Popper and John Stuart Mill and Friedrich Hayek.
Now, presumably you want Muslims to read this book.
Or if they can read and write,
But surely,
yes.
if you want Muslims to read this book, you're going to have to stop using the kind of quote-unquote extreme language that most Muslims believe you currently use.
Or in my new book, I'm not going to call the Prophet a pervert and a tyrant. He will be doing the talking. And it's going to be very respectful.
But you don't believe in God, do you?
Not anymore.
So, again, having read some of your writings, when you say that you want to change the relationship between a Muslim man or indeed a Muslim woman and their God, you want the human being to have a dialogue with their God and look their God in the face, how can Muslims take you seriously, give you credibility when you are an atheist? You don't believe in God.
I'm not trying, by the way, I'm not trying to change the relationship between the Muslim man and the Muslim woman. It's up to the Muslim man and the Muslim woman to change their relationships. What I can do is I can use my imagination and I can also use the facts that are in the Quran and in the Hadith and practice and then make something of it, a film such as Submission or the book that I'm currently involved in. And then it's up to them to read that, take note of that, agree with it, disagree with it, debate with it, or just ignore it. But in my case, controversy has always meant Muslims trying to take away my life and to threaten me. And that is, I think, what the gentleman with his magazine should be writing about, and he should be denouncing that.
You can't